and easy. Let me give you some background of who I am and why I'm speaking to you. I was asked by Sarah, who's my niece, to open this meeting on the basis that she knows that I speak very loudly. That's my main aim. I'm not a professional speaker, but there's one thing that I have got and I can say to you. In the mid-1980s, I was on the board of governors. I started as a parent governor and I ended up as the chairman of governors on a school, not in this borough, not in this area, but in London. In the mid-1960s, we had something very similar happen to us. We had a secondary school, bang in the middle of the borough, and it was recognised as having a falling school roll. Not drastically, but having a falling roll at a particular time. The aim was to close that school and send the pupils out to the edges of the borough, where rather than walking to school, they'd go by bus. We argued at the time that whilst there was a falling roll, it wouldn't necessarily continue. We were told by the local authority at the time that they'd looked at this thing very, very carefully, and they knew what the birth rate was going to be, they knew what future school rolls were going to be, and there was no doubt at all that this school should close. We fought it for 2 or 3 years and lost. And in 1980, that school closed. We were, however, in our opposition, we were right. Because 6 years later, there were plans within the local borough to build a brand new school, larger than the one that they closed, in the middle of the borough. They had to close a part to find the building land, because they'd already sold off the land for housing. And of the school roll that wasn't going to be there because they knew better, I can now tell you that that school that opened in just 2002, 12 years after the closing of the first one, it now has a school roll of 1,325. That's 1,325 children that the local authority told us would not be born and would not be there. So when you're presented by Essex County Council with numbers and statistics, and you also see that the school that they're closing are producing their own statistics, then look at both sets of figures very carefully, because you can do an awful lot of things with a flow chart and a spreadsheet. It isn't necessarily true. What we're here for today is to put forward a vote of no confidence. Now, can we dispel a rumour straight away? A vote of no confidence has absolutely no constitutional position at all. It's been used to bring publicity to the campaign to keep the Dean School open. That's entirely what it's been used for. If it were Parliament, a vote of no confidence would get rid of a government. This vote of confidence isn't going to get rid of Essex County Council, and it isn't going to change a decision overnight. What it's doing is it's trying to express that there are very strong feelings from parents, pupils, the community, and some of the local councillors that this decision is wrong. Should you vote tonight, and we're going to ask you to vote on a motion of no confidence, it will not change the position one iota. There are 2 people specifically mentioned in that vote of no confidence, and I think it's Tim Coulson and Councillor Gooding. Gooding, I can't read my own writing. In both cases, I think we're saying that they've got things badly wrong. The one thing that I'll say to parents, councillors, and any other interested party is that, like it or not, both of those people will be in post next week. At some stage, rather than giving them a vote of no confidence, what you will need to do is to sit down and talk to them and talk to them seriously about the future of the school. This is what needs to happen next. Having given a vote of no confidence, it isn't the end of the matter, it isn't going to solve anything. You will not negotiate this school remaining open by backing particular people into a corner. You will need to talk to them. Now, what I'd now like to do is to, in a second, pass over to Linda, because Linda's produced a report that obviously is the opposition to the, is it called the committee report? The committee's proposal submitted by Essex County Council. There are 5 matters in there that if you read it carefully, 4 of them are on legislation, and 1 is on what they call statutory guidance. What we're actually saying in this report is that there are statutory things that must happen before you close a school. There are things that you have to consider before you do that. And where, if you read the report and those particular issues, you will see that what's actually being said is that procedures are not being followed. It's a legal position as well as a statement that we believe that something's not right. So that's something that will need to be addressed as well. But let me pass over to Linda because she's a stats lady.
And a good one.
But you have to forgive me, I'm not a very good public speaker. As you can see, I am used to surrounding myself with paperwork and stats and facts. So I'll try to convey as clearly as possible our response to the Essex County Council proposal on the deeds. As Colin said, we believe that Essex County Council are not acting within the spirit of the legislation that governs the closure of schools. This is the law of the country. Basically, the proposal that's been put forward is very narrow. It only talks about closure of the Dean's School. And as a community, we know that that is a much, much bigger issue for all concerned. There are 4 schools involved in this proposal, not 1. And the legislation actually provides for this kind of situation where the consideration is being given to the closure of the school and the extension of others. The legislation clearly says that where proposals are interdependent, they should be identified as related, either by being published in a single notice or linked to the other proposal. But it should be clear in each notice. So as I've said, there's 4 schools affected with this proposal. The King John School is an academy, and we're not here to talk about whether or not that's a good school. It is obviously a good school, but it's very different to the Dean's School. It has a net capacity of 2,000 school places, including its 6th form, which includes 300 places. It has just applied for and been granted planning permission for an extension to its 6th form. And the plan is basically to incorporate the Dean's catchment area and split it 50-50 between Appleton and King John. The impact on King John, including its extension for its additional 6th form as a result of the school leaving age raising, means that it's a 2,000 place school now, but how big will that school be in 5 years' time after it has taken on the catchment children from the Dean's area and increased its 6th form? There's no information in the proposal about the impacts that will have on the community, and I'll come back to that. The Appleton School is also an academy. It currently has 1,200 places, and it too is considering extending its service provision to include a 6th form. Now there's a big hiccup here, as one would say, because they haven't actually got planning permission for that. So 30 children are able to go to the King John School, but we're not quite sure where the other 30 children are going to go at this point in time. And there's no guarantee that Castle Point Council will actually approve that planning application, because the head teacher of King John has stood up at a public meeting and said that her 6th form hasn't been successful as she was hoping, is undersubscribed, and therefore she would be able to use the new extension as the lower school for the Dean's children. if I was on Castle Point's committee and an application came in from Appleton, I would want to see evidence that there was indeed a need for additional sixth form places in the Castle Point area before any approval was given. But once again, the proposal does not give an overview as to what the number of places will be looking like in 5 years' time at the Appleton School, in the event that it did all flow through according to Essex County Council's plan. The Glenwood School wants to co-locate with the Dean's School, and we all know the benefits of integrating children of all abilities. The Dean's Head, Jan Atkinson, was asked by Essex County Council to lead the way. It's evident that Jane Atkinson is an expert in this regard. It wasn't just meant to be a visionary, groundbreaking model for the Castle Point area or in Essex. It was meant to be groundbreaking nationally. And there's nothing in the proposal that either acknowledges that or those aspirations or in fact apologises for the fact that this new proposal ignores those original aspirations that the community had. There was a consultation on it and everybody agreed. The Dean's School is the centre of the community. It's not just a school, it has a wonderful sports facility. That sports facility is used not just by the children of the Dean's School in a very proactive, positive way, but it's also used by people, adults and alike, from within the community and from outside of the community. The school itself is involved in many positive health activity training out in the primary schools through the Castle Point and Rochford Sports Partnership. That is a benefit not only to the children of the Deans who learn how to interact and help other children, but it's also positive for the recipient schools. That too isn't even been looked at within the proposal. These are all interrelated issues. The real questions for the community are, do you want to reduce parental choice and only have one supersized, that's King John's School, and cross your fingers that Appleton actually gets the planning permission to extend? Meanwhile, you lose the Dean's School and its existing community sports facilities. Or do you want one supersized, possibly two, and one smaller school co-located with Glenwood and retain the many beneficial community partnerships and sports facilities enjoyed by some 3,000 local people and the wider community? So they are the real issues. They are much wider than this very narrow look in the proposal at the Dean's School. This is covered in the legislation. It says if it's interrelated, it should be looked at in the whole, not as a snippet within the entire issue that's been asked to be looked at by the community. That's the key legislative error, but there is a whole host of areas within the legislative framework that we do believe that Essex County Council are not adhering, and they're set out in Appendix 1. I don't intend, it's a lovely warm evening, I don't intend to talk through those. I think the key message is with the interrelated issues. By far the biggest evidence as a group, as our 3,200 parents have very busily, having been told not to be emotional about the closure, we have become researchers overnight, and there is some really good skills within the group. So I can't take all the credit for this. Most of it is based on the research that came in from every single member of our team. We believe that the calculation for the need for school places shown in the proposal are incorrect. Now this could either be through gross negligence or gross inept, or It could be for a number of reasons, or it could be basically looked at as being fraudulent. So we're a nice group, we're a very peaceful group. I'd like to think that there were just a few hiccups along the way. Others may misinterpret it differently. So let's have a look at the numbers. The Dean's forecast in the proposal looks quite scary on the face of it, but we do believe that their baseline figures are incorrect. What they have done basically is they've said that King John and Appleton are the most popular schools, and so in producing their forecast they have filled King John and Appleton and then assumed that everybody else will go along to the Deans. That's a very sort of flying the, that kind of perception, isn't it? But their whole case is based on ifs, buts and maybes. So, in doing that, you would assume then, because they filled those two schools, that any new builds that are actually included in their calculations would all go to the Deans, because the other two schools are full. That hasn't happened. They have apportioned the new builds that are known and in their documentation, which are clearly out of date, and apportioned them over all three schools. So we have rejigged the figures and reflected the true statistics in terms of the forecast. They also made a big mistake. For 2013, they underestimated the number of children by 59. So this is probably because primary school year 6 is so low, but it shows that their forecasting can be really out. That's a lot of children to get wrong, 59 children in their forecasting during 2013. So if a similar level of error happens over other years, where would these extra children go? Because the Deans would be shut down and the other two schools will be full up. So if these figures are wrong, the community is really, really in trouble. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. We are going to submit these figures, or we have submitted these figures to the Scrutiny Task and Finish Group. More importantly, in addition to their forecasts being wrong, they also have found to look at new developments that have been agreed by the Castle Point Cabinet Committee as part of the new local plan development, which isn't going to be completed until spring 2014. But there are a number that we've picked up, and also there's a new mini town in Rayleigh that's planned with an additional 770 houses. We do know that a primary school is planned for that area, but there is no thinking at the moment about where those children will go to a secondary school. So in total, we have basically, sorry I should note off my hand, we've come to the conclusion that in addition to the houses that are not yet built in Castle Point's existing plan, there is, including the Rayleigh development, there's another 1,854 houses to be built in the next 5 years. Where will these children go to school if the Deans is closed? So if they've got their forecast wrong and they haven't included the new developments and the school is closed, it would be an absolute travesty. Now I notice in the Essex County Council paperwork that they have said that Castle Point intend to build 200 houses per year. So you may think, okay, well that's going to elongate the situation until it becomes a full number quota of children placements at the Deans. Well, in today's paper, I don't know if anybody's managed to see the echo tonight. I did read in Castle Point's Cabinet report that after the Glenlands appeal, they thought it might be likely that they would be asked to build more than 200 houses per year. And the headline here is, Council must find space for 2,350 homes instead of 1,200. Double the number of new houses are needed in the borough. So, at the very least, I think the consultation should be ground to a halt now, and Essex County Council should revisit their numbers and basically let the entire community know that our doors are open for business, so that Mrs Atkinson and her team can start rebuilding the school that Essex County Council had a hand in constructively closing. There is just one other issue, because as we all know, the Dean's School is made up of not just children from within the Castle Point catchment area. There is also a large proportion of children from the South End area, and also, like myself, from the Basildon area. And we're not all blonde and dim in Basildon. So, we have looked at responding to Essex County Council with regards to how we felt that that was not an equal opportunity for all children, the proposal to push back the Basildon and South End children, and whether or not that actually fits with the Every Child Matters agenda, or as if I would say, no, I'm going to not be very Basildon. Stick to the facts. Right, the Basildon area. I'm from Basildon, I know it very well. That's why my son's at the Dean's. It's made up of 3 areas: Basildon, Billericay and Wickford. There are some very good schools in Basildon and Wickford, in Billericay and Wickford, but you have to be quite well off to live in the Billericay area. So, by far the biggest geographical area is the Basildon area, excluding Billericay and Wickford. And they have 4 schools serving that area. It's James Hornsby, a satisfactory school with 26% gaining 5 A stars to C qualifications, including English and Maths. The Basildon Academy, an inadequate school, although I was surprised that it is actually attaining 45% gaining 5+ grades A to C. Woodlands is a very good school. Well, I'll take that back, it's a good school, with 40% gaining 5 A to Cs. But this is an oversubscribed school, and as I understand it, they have just basically agreed to build on the Dry Street green belt. And there's something like, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any councillors from Basildon, 725 new homes. That's within the Woodlands catchment. So it's oversubscribed now, so where are those children going to go? Down south, it welcomes pupils who wish to share in a Catholic education. It is a very good school, but it is oversubscribed, and I have heard of mums actually converting in order to get into the school. So, is it fair? 12% of the pupils at the Dean's, that's currently 95 children. So if you take that as an average per year, that's 30 children per year. If the Dean's is closed, those children will be pushed back to the Basildon area, and they will get a choice of James Hornsby, the Basildon Academy, basically, for an education. It's also important to say that because King John and Appleton have an entrance test for out of catchment area, the pool of children that want to gain access to that education has just gone from that to that. Because the Dean's is closed, South End and Basildon are pushed back. Those mums that want to seek a better education for their children outside of their catchment will be looking to Appleton and King John and other schools by entrance. So this pool of children, also for the brighter children, is going to go like that. That means less brighter children equally are not going to have access to a good education because there aren't enough spaces. The South End situation. South End mums have been very vocal, I'm pleased to say. If there's some here tonight, are there?
I'm a counsellor, Southern Dancing Bar.
Okay.
Last time I came to listen.
Glad you could
I'm
come
a
along.
practitioner.
Okay, similar situation. Basically, 30% of pupils at the Dean's School is from the Southend Borough area. And if the Dean's closes, that means 47 children per year on average will be pushed back to the Southend area. Similar situation, those Southend parents are coming and looking at the Castle Point schools for a better education for their children. When the Dean's closes, they'll be pushed back to their area and they will be faced with schools like Castleview, which is a satisfactory school with 58% gaining 5 A to C qualifications. Sorry, I'm on the candy page. So in Southend, it's Cecil Jones, 40% gaining 5 A to Cs. Chase High School, again, 40% gaining 5 A to Cs. And the Futures Community College is an inadequate school with 29% 5 A to Cs. So it's not unusual to see why parents that really care about their children's education look for diversity and a school that can provide a good education for their children outside of their catchment if the local authority or the local educational authority can't provide those schools within their own catchment. It's the reason we all go to the Deans, because of its diversity, its Ofsted rating as a good school, and indeed because of its inclusive ethos and because of its community sports facilities. We have some top athletes at our school that are representing their country. You know, it's not just a little sort of bat and ball club. And it's completely not even been recognised within the Essex County Council proposal. We also have some children from Canby at our school. They have some good schools on Canby, but there is 500 new homes planned for Canby. So basically, those schools will be full within the next 5 years. So where are children from those additional new builds going to go to school if the Dean's is closed? This is a much wider issue than just looking very narrow-mindedly at the Dean's school and closing it. It's you know, it reaches right out into the community, and the Dean's school is the hub of the community in the Castle Point area. So basically our proposal then, we're talking about not acting within the legislation. I will confirm that I have finally had a response back from Essex County Council through the complaints procedure, and hopefully we should be able to take it forward. The calculation for the need for school places, I think, needs to be looked at as a matter of urgency, because if those figures are wrong, that's why this thing started. So if they're wrong, they need to be looked at immediately, and this needs to be shut down in its tracks now.
I think that before we invite any comments, we are at the end of this meeting going to put forward that motion for no confidence. As I said earlier, I know that we have some local councillors here, particularly from Castle Point, and I think from Southend and Essex County Council as well. And Rebecca Harris, the local MP. I think that what we need to say is that the two persons named in the vote of no confidence were invited to this meeting and chose not to attend, although I believe they've sent along a representative to take notes and report back. It would be very churlish and easy to criticise those two people for not coming along to the meeting, but I don't think that that's the right thing to do. I can see why they wouldn't want to attend, because this meeting is being called specifically to oppose the closure of this school. and they would be walking into a hostile environment. That's not what a local official needs to do, and that's not what a local council would look forward to doing. They would like probably to meet their own agenda rather than this form of public meeting. So let's get nothing wrong about this. We should not be criticising people personally, because you will find with councillors, they generally stand for election because they have good intentions. And when people work for a local authority within education, it's a chosen profession, and usually you will find that they would like to do that for the good of the children that they're representing. So whilst they're not here, I don't want anybody to draw any inference by the fact that they're not. But again, we welcome their involvement at a later stage, and would warmly invite them along to any meetings that they would care to attend.
We would welcome the opportunity to sit down, basically, and talk through what exactly it is that they do want. Because somebody said to me, actually I was having an interview with Park Radio, and one of the questions was, the statistics around how many schools have managed to overturn a consultation on a school closure. How did I feel about that? And what I'd like to say is we have solid evidence. We're a very intelligent group. This isn't all about, throwing banners around. We want to open a proper dialogue with Essex County Council and talk through our concerns and make sure at the end of the day we should all have the same goal in mind, and that would be to provide a sustainable solution for the education of our children, not just now but for future generations. The proposal at the moment means that all of the children within the Dean's catchment area will be getting on a bus to go to their new school. What happens if all these houses are built, not immediately, but over a period of time, and that catchment grows? That is really against all sorts of clear thinking. We shouldn't be engaging in transporting children to school. They should be able to walk to school, to their local community. It's a community hub of school. So yes, we would welcome the opportunity to sit down, look at our figures properly, look at our concerns with regards to the inequalities issue, pushing back Basildon and South End children. And not least of all, we have done a little bit of research around what the actual saving of this proposal will be, because let's face it, we are in a recession, an economic recession. We all know that everybody's tightening their belts. We know that money's tight and funding's tight. But a similar exercise was conducted in 2009 with 500 children being moved from a Chelmsford school and 2 extensions built at alternative schools. In 2009 that cost 6.5 million. If you compound that up, use my fingers, 19, 12, that's 4 years compounded interest. Do that in my brain, that's about 9 million. So the cost of rebuilding our element of the school, because the 20.5 is split. Was split. I think it was 11.3 for the Deans. Now, if you build just the Glenwood, those costs are going to go up because there were some shared facilities. So they don't actually know what the costs of just the Glenwood will be. So if that was, Glenwood bit? 10 million. To say that because there isn't those efficiency savings, to say that goes up to 12 million, and then the extensions cost 9 million, where is the saving?
They've actually spent more.
They've actually spent more. And equally, if they close the Deans now, and all these new builds come along, and as Colin has said, in 5, just as they're closing the Dean's doors to the last year 11 pupils, they're faced with having to build a new school. And with that, you need to buy the land, you need to build the school, you know, because it needs paying for. That's going to be sort of circa 40 million. So the minute saving now is going to be a huge expense to the taxpayer in 5 or 6 years' time. It makes no sense whatsoever. This proposal makes no sense whatsoever.
Can we ask for any questions from the board, please?
I'd like to ask, has a letter or a question gone to the scrutiny committee at Essex County? Those that would look at it if it went to the full council scrutiny meeting. Has a letter gone to them to advise them that we've requested a round the table meeting with people at Essex County currently dealing with it, and that they're refused? So the scrutiny committee themselves are aware of that fact, and it gets.
We haven't officially invited them to any meeting as such. That's why it was covered in tonight's evening. That is what our aim is. We want to engage with them. It is something we will invite them to do immediately after this evening. I will have to wait for them to reply, basically.
In which case, can I suggest that that's an open letter that does go to all scrutiny members of the
Absolutely,
council?
yeah. And it won't give anybody else. That's the whole idea.
We did meet with the scrutiny panel on Wednesday. We were given an opportunity to meet them. They have received our document, and we have got written assurance from Robert Fox that the document will be looked into, and all the evidence that we've given them will be scrutinised in the same way as Essex County Council.
In fact, they said in a forensic fashion, yes, they will look at our evidence. So that was quite reassuring.
What I suppose I'm wary about is that can they do it forensically, say there, and nobody else is in the room?
All the scrutiny panel's minutes and meetings will be available on the Essex County Council website, so they're all there to be able to be seen. And I do believe that they did say they were having public meetings, so I believe they're meeting Castle Point Council next week. They're public meetings, you can go to them and have your say as well.
What I think would be more helpful now is the dialogue element. Rather than them look at it, then respond, and then you respond, and it's like an email
exactly
situation where everybody misunderstands something along the way, don't they?
No, that's our next move. That's exactly what we're aiming for. Now that our report has been published and it has been given to them, that's our next step. We need to engage with them, and that's what we're going to do.
As I said earlier, the point of the vote of no confidence is to engage their attention and then talk to them. So the vote of no confidence is got no legal meaning whatsoever. It's an expression of a desire to enter or deny.
It's how we feel at Save the Dean's campaign. You know, we're sitting here not because there are 4 of us that have written a report and put it together or whatever. It's because we're speaking on behalf of 3,000 people who have agreed our report, who have put input into this report, who have commented. And that is my point of this evening. This evening is supposed to be about transparency, and it's supposed to be clear to everybody's intentions and what they want to say. If anybody wants to stand up and say their piece, this is your opportunity. You are parents. This is what this meeting is for. There is no, I'm sorry, that's a statement, just questions, please. Make yourselves heard, be diplomatic and support us to the end. We're not going to go away. We are continuing our progress, and we will fight this for the long haul as long as it takes. I know that everyone else on this campaign is behind what I've just said. This is our opportunity, so please stand up, some of you.
I think it's a few comments really. One is just to point out that the rebuttal by the school has used the figures from Essex County Council. We don't agree with them, but that's the figures that have been used.
Absolutely.
And that demonstrates very clearly that there's not going to be enough. Even using their figures, there's not going to be enough places for children in this area in the future. So that's a really important point.
Yes.
Because as taxpayers,
that's your
you're
money.
exactly right. We will be paying for the rebuild
Absolutely.
on Greenbelt land somewhere not very far down the line. The second, I guess, is to echo the point made by the gentleman behind me, which is I have concerns, and I understand the reasons why there's no local people from Essex County Council involved in the process. I understand the rationale for that. But I have some concerns because they don't know the things we know about our area. I live just down the road from the school. I live in a tiny cul-de-sac. There's 10 houses. In that. There were 10 bungalows in the cul-de-sac. And in the time, 12 years that we've been there, 21 extra bedrooms have been added in those 10 bungalows. Now that won't show up on any new buildings. That's 21 extra bedrooms in 10 houses that have now got children in them. So when you're looking from afar, you won't see that it's not just about a block of land with new buildings on it. There are people there's none of us believe that this area is not going to have more people in the future than it has. None of us believe that. That's the second point. And the third is that, again, it's a local issue. The Deans is a school that is a sports specialism. You gain your specialism because it's a recognition that's really important for a community to have that. We've got a sports specialism at the Deans, and we do really well with that. We've got some fantastic examples of how that's worked. And the talk is to move our children to a school where the government changed the rules last year about the amount of school playing fields that had to be available for schools. A school the size of King John should, up until last year, should have had to have 85,000 square metres of playing fields. That would go up because they're going to take another 180 children. Now all it says is that you must have adequate playing fields. It doesn't give an indication of what adequate means, it says you must have adequate. Well, last year it was 85,000. I was just looking at the plans for King John, where there is no room to build. It looks as though they're probably about 45,000, 50,000. They're miles under what you need to provide sporting facilities.
Just on that, I know that King John actually bused their children to Eastwood to use their sports facilities.
And we're talking about putting more children there. So what is the message that that's delivering about our concern for sport in our community a year after the Olympics? A year after local issues that we understand, which is why I agree with the man behind me. We need that opportunity as a school, as a parent group. I'm a governor of the school, I'm a parent, and I'm a taxpayer. So I see this from all angles. We need that opportunity to have that dialogue, and we've not had that yet, and I think we should be most strongly asking.
Well, absolutely, that is our next step forward as of Monday
If I
morning.
can add something to the point of sports facilities within your community actually also apply to neighbouring councils and other areas where they send their children into that particular school. When that school doesn't exist anymore, this is about parental choice, or it's supposed to be about parental choice. People coming from Basildon, coming from Canby and coming from Southend, who were deliberately sending their children towards the Deans, perhaps in some cases because the sports facilities were more readily available, they will also be having their choices removed as well. It's not just about this community, it's about the much wider area. And whilst you're right in saying that, I would just add it applies to many other areas as well. And that's why because it's a specialism within this school, that's always very important. Where it's recognised within Ofsted as being excellent in that field, and quite rightly when you say we've just come away from the Olympics offering as a nation legacy, it's very disappointing to see that one particular part of our community, the education service, wants to move away from that very quickly. That's the point that you made about this particular area applies more widely in the Southend, Canby, Basildon, Rochford areas.
Yeah, well, let me just take that one step further. Because the Deans has a sports specialism, it has teachers that are very specialist in that area, and they go out and support local schools.
Yes.
I don't know how that will work, and we've not been told how that will work if the Deans closes.
They may not wish to be there. Who knows?
No, well,
If the Deans closes, the support that they provide to all the other schools closes.
we'll go with it. Yeah.
Which is the cost to the other schools. That's the
Yes.
absolute cost to the primary schools as well,
Absolutely.
because they will need to bring that in on a professional level.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked very closely with Hadley Infants, and I spoke to the head who actually met the scrutiny committee on Wednesday as well. And we were talking about the support that Deans gives them. Now, King John were actually a sports support school about 5-6 years ago, before Deans took over. King John gets support. You get a certain amount of money, and Mrs. Danny told me it was £12,500. Not once did King John support the school. In fact, Hadley Infants didn't even know that King John was their sports school.
King John have never been into funds in the same
No.
as I've been.
So, you know, they had all the money, but they never came out. Deans don't necessarily get all the money, but they're there every single time. Sports days, PE lessons,
And not just
you know,
sports, all gifted and talented stuff comes
Yeah.
in from these
yeah,
as well.
absolutely. It does. You know, it's a teaching school as well. They have teachers come in from other schools, and the deans teachers go out and they all support each other. It would all go, all of it.
I think, I mean, obviously it's both no confidence or it's debate, but I do think a big part of the no confidence element is actually trusting the City County Council to deliver
Yeah.
in what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Because,
Absolutely.
you know, what they've done, if you, I mean, okay, let's frame it in the sports, just on the sports side, and they've made kind of, in the consultation, what they put forward is that we will review what the sports hall will do. We're not sure about that.
There is
So,
no plan B.
because they don't actually want to tell the community what the plan is. Probably they either haven't got a plan or they have got a plan, one way or the other. And that kind of, that's the confidence that's kind of, we're really lacking in terms of their strategic thought about the plan, how they're going to deal with it, how they're going to fund it, how they're going to actually go and live up to some of those loose promises that, oh yeah, of course the local community people are going to get sports people to support. Of course we're still going to have a community. No, that's the bit that kind of has been shattered by their very actions of the deans at the moment. And I think that's the bit that we've got to kind of hold to task with, because everything they're saying, you actually can't trust that in 6 months' time, what they've done is they've backed, you know, they're back God knows how many miles in terms of their promises, and say, no, we can't do that because of economics, and we've never thought about that, and this is under consultation, this doesn't make any money. And it's this credibility of the plan and the thought process that's really, I think, being brought to question.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and I think that's everything we just talked about.
Well, it came back to that very first point I made about the interrelationship between all of the issues.
Yeah.
That you know, the wider issues. I mean, to be honest, there are businesses that operate from that sports centre. That, you know, and some of them are doing it for a living. A lot of the passing trade is from the school, and in a survey that we did from those businesses, there aren't similar facilities anywhere near the locality, and it's going to impact on their businesses. So there is a social and economic cost to the closure of the school, in addition to the issue with the gym. They're not separate. They should be looked at in its entirety. The sports facilities and the school. It's a sports, you know, it's a sports specialism school, and I don't think we should really have this airy-fairy 4 lines in the proposal that isn't really telling us anything. So how can we respond to the consultation when there's too many if, buts and maybes? We don't, you know, we don't know. What are they going to do? Because in addition to that, the school is a huge employer, and those 50 sports specialists employed by the school actually coach and teach young people to become coaches. And they then go out into the, you know, into the big wide world, and that's a job for them. Where's that all? You know, that's all just going to disappear, is it? It's.
But the thing is, they don't want to join them up. That's the thing. What
they
they
don't
want to do,
join them up.
because they're making it a school issue, they're not making it a community issue. But if they actually said, let's be honest, we really think we should shut the whole thing down, then I think the community would act differently. Because
This comes back to, this does actually come back to legislation. They are obliged to take into account other issues other than just the school itself. So this is something that's been put out in the report specifically to say that this is where they've failed. So upon examination, hopefully that report, it needs to be answered why that hasn't happened. And that's one of the questions that during the course of any meeting that is arranged will certainly be asked.
It's just a point. My colleague is good at statistics on the panel, and that is a term that's used in today's society is hidden household. For those that have never heard the term, basically it's where you have a 2-bedroom property, shall we say, and you have 5 people squashed into it because they can't afford to move elsewhere. They've had children, or they've had brothers who have moved in, or sisters, and they can't move on. Now, why is this relevant? Well, obviously, if you're forecasting figures on house build, and that assumes everybody will move in and be the perfect two down type of family,
Yeah,
then it
1.8
doesn't take into account hidden households. Now, you've got organisations as wide as Shelter and the government themselves and every single local authority in the country recognises hidden households because they have developed allocations policies to help people move out of them. If the country as a whole recognises hidden households, what I'm not clear about is how Essex County are recognising them when they develop.
It's a very good point to be made, but before you get Essex County Council to recognise hidden households, I think that you do better to get them to recognise 1.8 children first, because they seem to feel that under certain circumstances the number is closer to 0.75 children. I think we all know that that's nonsense. So once we've got them to recognise the fact that the birth rate isn't quite where they think it is, then perhaps we could move over to extraordinary circumstances, as you suggested.
So 2 points. Picking up on that point, I was looking at Castlepoint's local plan today, and Castlepoint identifies and acknowledges that there are areas of Hanley that are within the lowest 20% of poverty in the whole of the UK. So that would fit in perfectly with the Hanley issue. The other thing I noticed in the local plan is that Sport England are offering guidance into Castlepoint in terms of what needs to be done to provide adequate sporting facilities in the area. So it may well be worth getting them involved now at this stage.
I already have.
Brilliant.
So we've also been in contact with an organisation called Sported, and that's also covered in here. I don't know if many of you have ever heard of Sported. I haven't, but basically it's a foundation that was established as a direct result of the legacy of the London 2012 Games, which vowed to use sport to change the lives of young people. And up until now, I mean, I mentioned how I truly believe that sport acts as a positive for young people. It teaches them to be part of the team. It teaches them to respect other people's views. It keeps them fit and healthy. It keeps them out of trouble. And I'm a great believer in it. My boy belonged to about 5 clubs, just to make sure he wasn't on the Xbox every night. So, but what this organisation has done, it's done some really amazing research, and it's been looking at the impact it has in reducing the risk of young people's involvements in relationships to substance misuse, crime and antisocial behaviour, improvements in well-being and educational attainment. Our Ofsted report made mention of that. But what they've done is they've looked at the actual cost of the removal of sports facilities from a community. And, this is quite a high-profile foundation. And basically the societal cost saving is 4,174, so that shows you how pedantic they are, 12 pence per participant per annum. That's a very powerful argument, because
How much is that, Linda? £4,700?
£4,174.
That's more than the school gets per child.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get
3,700.
Yeah.
Let's say. So the cost to removing it
Yeah.
is greater than the cost of educating them.
Exactly. Yeah. It's worth having a look at this research. It absolutely was an eye-opener for me. And there are some really highly influential people involved on the board on this particular foundation. So, it wasn't just, there was basically 3,888 projects from 198 agencies. So, it was a huge piece of research. And it's the first time people have always said sport's good for young people. No one's actually been able to pinpoint it to the financial, societal costs. Well, they have now. It's an amazing foundation. And that's in our report.
At the back, sir, for the...
Yeah, I'm a local councillor, copyrighted, lived in the borough for over 50 years. I've known pupils who've gone through Dean School since it first opened. I know teachers that taught there when it first opened. I know teachers who teach there now. I know learning support assistants who teach there now. And what you're coming across with is a very good argument. But I think what you need to progress is the sport is an aspect of that school. What we don't want to lose is the community school. Yeah? It is a community school with an add-on of a sports facility, and it's a sports college, a sports school. Don't, in my opinion, don't drive all the way towards being sport, because it's a good academic school. I know kids that have left there that are teachers, doctors, nurses.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so let's not move away from the education side, because first of all, it's an establishment that we need. And whether we've got 500 pupils there, 600 pupils there, 1,000 pupils there, it's a facility we need.
Yeah.
And I would go back to what they did at Fairfax High School, where they amalgamated with Westborough in the early 80s, and then they found out that was a misdemeanour, and ended up building the Chase School. So you can't always take something out, because with the way the population revolves, you need to put that back in. So they lost a lot of money when they released Fairfax, Westborough High School, now that's called the Chase School. The same thing's going to happen in other areas. If you take away a facility, Castle View was a classic example. They built it for a capacity of 900 children. Then they realised that Ferdwick Park was on its way out, it only had 500 children there. But they didn't have the capacity at Castle View, the old site, to rebuild. So they had to move into Ferdwick Park. And that's why you've got the new Castle View School. So the argument you've got is got to be factual, and it's got to maintain the education side, and the sports facility is an add-on. It does work for the community, but I think the need of the children and the population in Castle Point needs a school. Whether it's 500, 600, 700 or whatever, it needs that facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my name's Colin Ryan, I'm actually a Victoria Ward member. And the thing that I'm surprised about is that I went along with Rebecca Harris and a few other members on the 10th of June to Council Hall and had a meeting with Tim Coulson. We asked a number of questions. Frankly, we didn't get an answer, although he tried to do it.
We haven't had an answer to anything.
When I was at Dean School on Wednesday, to make my submission to these groups there, I've asked the same questions again. I mean, you need to be asking these questions, because clearly there are some really important questions about who's going to replace who's going to provide the Glenwood link and the Glenwood stuff that, you know, I mean, apart from the fact that they've still not come up with a plan B for Glenwood, you know, and what's going to happen, it's going to be delayed by 18 months at least, and we're well short in Essex of special education needs. But how are you going to word your vote of no confidence, and how are you going to impact that through mainly? Because, you know, I mean, local councils, Castle Point councils have been meeting on the 30th, but I think Essex County councils, local councils, are meeting on the 29th, so they've got an opportunity there as well. I mean, you really need to impress on those Essex councillors, you know, these points that are being raised tonight, because they can actually ask. That's the reason why they're not going to allow to be on the scrutiny panel. It's to give them an opportunity to represent you people, the school, and the people that are, you know, coming up with these arguments. So you need to get some wording to those county.
There's a wording here, and that is the vote of no confidence. I mean, I don't think there are any other this is a document that's been published. I would like to emphasise that it has no legal status. It is an important document to show that there is a strength of feeling. It has no legal status whatsoever, no matter which council chamber it appears in.
Right, Councillor Bigler, Sean Sealon, Ward Councillor. Have you seen the stats from one of the teachers at Dean's Desert?
Yes, actually we have.
Which actually proves that increase Appleton and King John's by one full venture, which is what the county are doing, and you take out D's, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, they don't cover the places.
Yeah, we've
And
seen
you're
that.
also expected to have a margin of 5%. That's the normal margin that a school's county is expected to have to cover unexpected migrations. Because you never know, you could always have another down farm or
Exactly.
something
If,
like that, or a sudden influx of people from London, and you've got a house and school.
That's right, these are our points, exactly. If anyone hasn't seen the new report from the Dean's School, we have some copies here that I printed out quickly this evening. If you want to take one of them, that's fine. If not, if there's not enough copies to go out, please email me and I can send that directly to your email so you can have a look at their evidence and their response as well.
I'd like to respond to that as well, because as the parental group, we did our research and we calculated our figures, and at the same time the school was having a look at the figures, and at some stage I did talk to Desi and say, I need, you know, it's like being back at school, to be honest, a long time since I've had a chat with a teacher to see if I've got my sums right. But we weren't exact, but we was almost both got the same figures. And that tells me, come on, we're mums and parents, you know, is Essex County Council, you know, doing this for, you know, other reasons. They have the same information that we've got.
Sorry, can I just come back on that last comment? Have you asked that question?
Yeah.
And what was their answer?
Did not.
Ask it again. And keep asking it. What is your reason for doing it? There must be a reason. And, you know, champ at the bit.
And I have another daughter just about to start year 8, 15 closes. Our year 9 daughter will be able to finish her education then. But our year 8 was late. And I personally wrote to Tim Coulson. I had an email back from him. And he said that we were in a special case. And I don't know if that's so. He said if the Dean's closes, we will sit down and talk about our special case. Now, I'm sure there's more than a handful of us.
Yes, definitely.
We've got children in two different years that are...
There's a real problem with making people a special case, because when you decide that that's your policy and that's how you allocate cases in schools, you only ever get to the people that come to you with a special case. An awful lot of people that don't come to you are ignored and suffer in the way that you're doing. So to treat people as a special case is never the right answer.
No, that's it. I can't be the only person that...
No, I'm sure that's right.
Guarantee you're not.
Katie? Just following on from Councillor Isaac, it was in my head as you asked him to speak. Because, yes, the Dean's is a sporting college, it's fantastic, it caters to the community. But the reason that myself as a parent chose the Dean's was for the special education needs side of it. Okay? And I don't want to bang on about it because that seems to be the only thing that I ever talk about. However, it's very, very important for me. My youngest one has only just, and circumstances have happened. My eldest daughter has got type 1 diabetes. That was the reason that I chose Dean's. However, now Rosie has been diagnosed with dyspraxia. Okay, so recent diagnosis. Dean's is the perfect school for her. They have got the learning facility that Councillor Isaacs has mentioned before. They've got everything that I need there. Can you really see me sending her to King John with 2,000 kids in the school? I have no other alternative if the Dean's closes but to homeschool her. Now, are Essex County Council going to provide me with funding so that I can homeschool her? Are they going to be able to help me because I'm not going to be able to go to work full time because I have to homeschool my daughter? That's not going to happen.
I doubt it.
I doubt it either. The other flip side of it
is, I'm fortunate to be in this position. However, the kids that go to the deans are a very, very diverse group. Okay, you've got high flyers, you've got kids with special needs, you've got the stragglers, you've got the kids that don't belong anywhere else, that have been excluded from other schools. Now, just hypothetically, if we have a student, I don't know the stats, I don't know any statistics, if we've got a child that is at Dean's because they've been excluded from King John and Appleton, or they're not bright enough to go to King John because they haven't passed the entrance exam, where is that child going to go?
They're going to get
special education needs.
They're going to get, this is the thing, it is a special needs school, but they are going to get children that don't have special needs. Because they don't know anywhere else to go.
Can I comment on that? I have an autistic brother and I have an autistic grandson, so I have some vested interest in that subject as well. When we talk about special needs schools, we also have to recognise the fact that many years ago we accepted the fact that where possible and where you can, community schools are and can be a better place for people with special needs. It doesn't have to be a special needs school. That goes back some years now. I mean, and that what they're actually providing in this particular school falls into that large category of what we call a community school. That it's diverse. It's got room for sport, yes. It's got room for high flies. It's got room for special needs because it's very much based within this community and open to all outside as well, where the parental choice is. If you've got reservations of what will happen when you remove part of the community school, the other schools are much larger and they're not specialised in that area, then you're very right to have those reservations, and it's important that's included within the reports that we make back as well. It's part of the process of negotiating with Essex to actually change their minds on this one.
Anyone else? I would just like to respond to that as well. I think at our scrutiny meeting, task and finish group, one of the issues that we raised was basically that Mrs. Akins knows what she's doing with regards to the integration of all sorts of children with all sorts of abilities. And I think her results in terms of her achievements, or the school's achievements in terms of exam results, she's achieving that with a real mixed bag of children, to be honest, compared to King John and Appleton that have got the creme de la creme walking through their door. So it speaks volumes that this Glenwood and Dean's co-locations under her umbrella, fully supported by the parents, is a
person actually did get an answer, and that was about what the assumptions were up until that point. And the answer that was given was there are no assumptions. I asked the same question on the same night, about 5 questions later, and I stood up and said, I don't believe you that there are no assumptions. If there are no assumptions, you're going to spend £21 million of taxpayers' money without even thinking about whether there are children. That is a negligent act.
Yeah.
So I don't believe you. I think there are assumptions, and I'd like to know what they were, because I want to know what's changed. And I was given the answer, there were no assumptions. We had no indication about what was going to happen. We've not looked at those figures. That was twice. That question was asked twice more on that evening, and it was asked in the following meeting. You look at the school's response, and they've got those assumptions. Where did they get those figures from? They got them from Essex County Council. So I've got serious concerns not only about not answering questions, but about answering questions with answers that are a deliberate lie. And I've written to the council, I complained about that, got no response, wrote back, and they said, oh, they lost my question, apologised profusely.
Sorry, just coming in on that, I've asked a question at the same first consultation meeting as well. What were the predicted admissions for the new build? Mr. Coulson said it would make any difference. There weren't any, and the new build would have no impact. I also asked the same question at the Thunderston meeting on a couple of Mondays back. And I said to Mr. Coulson, could you please tell me what the predicted admissions for the new build at Dean's are? I have got a freedom of information request out on it. Are you afraid to show us? And he stood there in front of the room and said 700. So his predicted admissions
750. That would make the school full and viable. He has answered his own consultation with his admission.
Isn't that worrying then, that
Yes.
that same question received a completely different answer?
Yes,
Repeatedly to parents. My children go to that school,
Yeah.
and it's obviously it's a very valid question. And when we talk about no confidence, that's one of the reasons why I have no confidence. Because when we're going through this process, I expect a few things. I expect the county council to be even-handed.
Yeah.
I expect them not to come with an agenda, and I expect them to be open and honest. And I think they have fallen badly low on all of those measures.
I'd pull up on that as well, that when we were at Undersea, I asked them about the falling figures, where had 500 children gone, and he didn't know his own figures, and B, he couldn't give us an answer.
But going back to what the gentleman said in Councillor Isaac, surely you mentioned about the chief executive. Can we not?
I personally don't think the chief executive will get involved with this, because she has a matter of due process for the council, the scrutiny.
But not even part of
I have written something. I'm just saying, I don't think she will. You'll get a polite letter back, and that is all you'll get. But I think the whole point about this, for me, is, and I've tried to get these questions answered still, the 21.8 million or whatever the figure is they talk about, sometimes it's 23 million, sometimes it's 21.8 million, right? It's council taxpayers' money. It's your money, belongs to you, it sits up in county hall. It's not dependent for the Department for Education or anything. It's actual capital funding that is up there, right? People keep talking about 23 million. We should be talking about the 10 million that they said they need to build these. Because regardless of what happens with these, they still have to build Glenwood. So there's £13 million up there out of your money that you need to rebuild Glenwood. Mr. Coulson has not answered the question, what happens if you build Glenwood on his own? Is there an increased cost? He doesn't think so. He's not a builder and he's not involved. But these are the sort of answers that we, as politicians, can't get an answer to. The point I'm trying to make to you is that the actual saving, I mean, the guess, the 2 million for King John and the 2 million for Appleton is a complete guess. It won't be £2 million. It will be more than £2 million, which will be an open invitation for King John and Appleton, because once they start to take the children from Deans, they'll want more money. So what you're looking at, actually, to rebuild the Deans is, I reckon, about less than £5 million. That's the £10 million that they've allocated to Deans, less than £6 million probably, or more that they're going to have to give to King John and Appleton. So you're talking about £4 million. I mean, that's the thing we should be arguing about. Is the future of the education of our children, that want to go to Deans and want to go to school, worth £4 million? Mr. Coulson said at a meeting, he's not concerned if the Deans closes, because the education of the young people in Coleshill will improve. Because, but I'm telling you what, this is what he said, he will improve. Because King John will be opened by catchment to the extended Deans area, Dean School area, so you'll have our catchment area for Dean School automatically done into King John, which will reduce the number of children going in there by examination. So he said, eventually the whole level of education in our level of education in Coleshill in the Dean's area will improve. That's what Mr. Coulson said. So that's his view. You see, he doesn't understand what's happening at Dean School and what never happens at King John or will ever happen at Appleton. Appleton School it may not come forward now, but they are proposing to build on their sports field. They want to build houses on their sports fields. So I mean, this is another situation here. If they take the extra children from the Deans, will they have any sport facilities, for their children? But that is a definite something that they're looking at Appleton School to
Sam, the Appleton one. Sorry, Ofsted had a report last week. They went into Appleton School. It's on pretty good authority. They've got a satisfactory mark from Ofsted. Indeed, it's good at the moment. So I don't know how anyone else feels about our director of education and learning, but shutting a good school and sending the kids to a satisfactory school.
It's actually part of
I think that's worth
Essex has never closed a good school.
No authority, no education authority has ever closed a good school.
It's
against the legislation.
That should be on your vote no confidence.
Can I just make a point that the thing Chris just said about Appleton and their Ofsted inspection hasn't been published yet, although it is due to, and it won't be published until September. So
So there's, you know, where is the evidence that by closing the Dean's School, our children within catchment will be going to better schools? They're not better.
No, Mr. Coulson said it.
I know.
He could be gone.
And it's only an if but maybe anyway, isn't it?
Exactly. Another of his is if, buts and no
Only
maybe.
30 of them, of course.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we also caught him out with regards to his views about South End data. In Mr. Coulson's scrutiny task and finished scrutiny, it says here, data from South End local authority about school closure planning suggests that there is not currently that it is not currently looking at additional provision in Essex to meet its needs. It's very clear he's never even got in his car and driven to South End to talk to them. Because in their local authority report from the school's adjudicator, South End is, it says, with regards to secondary education, in the Leigh-on-Sea area, which is, you know, what we're talking about, the rising number of reception-aged pupils has caused some difficulty with parents not gaining access to their catchment school. There have been particular difficulties in the Leigh-on-Sea area and central South End. Additional emergency places have been provided in the Leigh area where preference have not been satisfied. All pupils have been allocated an alternative school within a 2-mile hike. I mean, and it also goes on to say, in Southend, that 168 appeals went forward. This is where parents have applied for schools within the Southend area and not got their first choice. So it's very, very clear that they haven't even been talking together or liaising.
Sorry, just on that as well. We were talking earlier about the threshold of places, and it has to be between 5 and 10% on the graph. The primary school places in Southend is 0.5. So their threshold of places available is 0.5%. So they're well fit to burst, basically, is what I would say on that.
So the bottom line is, and this is me just talking completely bluntly, what have we got to do to stop this consultation now?
We won't stop it now.
No, I mean,
run its course.
No, of course, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
To stop it going to the next level.
Everything we can.
As a group, I don't think we could have tried any harder or acted any more peacefully or acted any more
Out of legislation.
We've discussed it. I don't think we could have done anything more than what we have tried to do.
But what I will say, just on that point, is that this is not over, even if the consultation ends on the 22nd. We must continue, as a group, to carry on researching and finding our evidence. Some of those FOI outstanding requests still have not been handed in. There is more evidence to come back, and this is not finished.
Well, even after the 20 days?
Even after the 20 days.
Yeah.
Sarah, you need to email Graham Button directly. He's the chairman's task force.
I invited him to
No,
see
I mean,
me.
if you've got stuff that is not being answered, you need to email him directly.
We have.
Email Mr. Fox. Because it's really, really important that they understand there are these points.
We did stress that to them.
Sorry, you've been waiting a long time. We're not that long, really. 5 or 10 minutes. Used to that. My name's Jamie Hunt, and I'm the County Member for Thornsley. And just following on from Councillor Riley's point, my view is, obviously we're all singing from the same hymn sheet here, and the arguments you put forward are very strong and very convincing. But my view is that you should actually contact the Chief Executive. If you're not getting the answers, or any answers to questions from Tim Coulson or Councillor regularly, then they have to be accountable to somebody. And why not bring in the Chief Executive? Of course, she won't like me. Ask everybody, she won't get involved. But there's no reason why you shouldn't get involved, and by doing so that could add a lot of weight. So I would actually write to the Chief Executive and ask why questions aren't being answered.
I think that that's a very good suggestion, and I would think that that would be taken on board.
Well, can I suggest it?
Jamie,
Jamie, can I suggest?
Jamie,
Jamie, can I suggest that you do that.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, because you're the county councillor, I mean, Jill Reeves will be coming back from holiday on Monday, and I'll be asking Jill Reeves to do that. She's the council member.
I have already sent those people invites for this evening, and I understand not everyone can come, and they have sent their apologies for that, but I did also send them the report. They have been in contact, they are up to date with this, so.
On a personal note, I was
local MPs do exactly the same, like so chief executives in the same manner. Just a suggestion.
sure Rebecca Harris, I don't even notice she's got best legs in the House of Commons. It won't get me in the Conservative Party.
But I would also think that the leader, political leader, which is who runs the body, therefore he is legally the chief employer.
That sounds like proper coalition to me.
Because in all honesty, I mean, Tim Coulson is an employee of Essex County Council, and as such, if this consultation has got off the ground based on factually incorrect predictions, and he hasn't been proactive in liaising with Southend, and I know for a fact, because I've been in contact with Barton Hendren at Basildon, and they have not contacted Basildon at all. Didn't know anything about it. So I've also been on to the leader of the council there. And the MPs. They are indeed very fed up with hearing from me.
Take the lady first.
Linda, I just wanted to come back on, you mentioned earlier that you've done some really kind of extensive research into numbers. And I was looking again today, because for me these are, obviously they don't add up, but I wondered if you maybe knew something that I'm missing when I'm looking at commissioning school places report. So one of the things that we've been told consistently is that it's a falling birth rate that's going to cause this to be unviable, basically. Okay? But when I look at the primary school numbers, just for Thundersley, Benfleet and Hackney, for today, on roll today, there are 3,484 children, and predicted on roll for the 2016-2017 intake, there are 3,453 children. So that's just 31 children different, but they're citing declining birth rates. So these are primary school children that we're talking about. Obviously, they're then going to come through into the senior schools. Yeah. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking through that is that in total, between King John and Deans and Appleton, on the basis that Deans is 1,000 head school, and including King John's sixth form, there are 4,400 places. Okay? If you take away Deans as 1,000 school, that leaves 3,200 places. Yeah. But in primary school, there's a prediction of 3,453 children. So 253 children not accounted for in Essex County Council's figures that are in school now. The other thing that it doesn't do, which I was very confused about, and you might know or might not, but it doesn't make any allowances for any additional sixth form children. No. So in 16 and 17, for example, on Canby, apparently there are no sixth form children. And in Thundersley, well, between the Deans, the Appleton and King John, only King John have sixth form children, and they only have the same number of sixth form children as they have this year, when it's not compulsory for them to be there. Exactly. So where are they all these children?
Exactly. Well, we have got our calculation here. Your numbers are more or less the same. I'm glad I'm passing the last grade. Just to give you some idea as to how out their numbers are.
Yeah.
I suppose it starts off in 2014-15. The Essex County Council error is 49, following year 62. By 2016-17 it's 86. By 17-18 it's 113, and it goes up and up.
It's just compounding.
Pardon?
It's
just compounding, yeah. So by the time we get to 2023-24, they have miscalculated 183 places.
And that's the bit when you say about their plan and you want to take the task over to the course. He's done this knowing that knowledge with just published data.
Exactly.
He's got to be okay.
He has to be held
accountable.
accountable.
That time, that all the people here are spending to defend his case, and he's done something as basic as that, as a knee-jerk reaction, which I think is basically what he's done in some ways. He has got to be held accountable.
Exactly.
Because that's what he gets paid to do.
Exactly.
You're quite right, and as we said earlier, that's the job of the chief executive to look into such matters, because that's his employer technically. So that's you were quite right. So that's a very good place to start.
Can I just make one point, just because the comment was made that this process will run its course, but the process can stop at any time.
Right,
They can make the decision to stop this process at any time.
Who is it that makes that decision?
The council could make that decision.
And that's not
Stop this process. I suspect they're getting very nervous now, because I really believe we've won the argument already. I think that's clear that we've won the argument. And you said we want a dialogue, and that's the challenge I would have to Essex County Council. They need to be coming and talking to the school right now. They've already done huge damage to our schools.
Absolutely.
And to our children, those children that are currently sitting their exams. My son's in year 10, sitting exams, others are in year 11.
And when it comes to it, they need to also tell us how they're going to help us repair our reputations.
Yeah, that's what we're going to need to do.
Can I come back to that specifically? Because when we started this meeting, I told you of a school that closed in 1990. And between 86 and 90, a lot of the argument was about the falling popularity of that school and how it became self-evident that that wasn't parental choice. That was a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when you tell parents that that school's not going to be open, it doesn't go down as a first choice. And that's why you're quite right. Whilst you can let something run its course, there is an element of urgency on this, because the longer this process goes on, the more damage you're doing as far as parents are concerned. Those that don't have the knowledge or don't actually understand all the issues will say, well, that's obviously closing, that's not where my child is going. And that will happen in great numbers. That's why it can't be left to run a whole process. It has to be, you have to insist day after day after day, this is looked at as a matter of urgency.
Okay, it's now 9:30. We've only got the hall booked until now, so if anyone wants to say and ask comments or questions, wrap it up and then we can do our thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you for the
Oh, no, we've all done hard work. We've all done it. Well done.
So finally, technically, this was a vote of no confidence. I'll excuse any politician or councillor who wants to abstain, because that's the right thing to do if they feel that they should. But can I see a show of hands for a vote of no confidence, please? I think that is carried hugely.
Thank you very much for everyone who attended this evening. It's really lovely for your time.
Yes.